I'll do, and nearly a very Merry Christmas to everybody. Obviously, December 24th today. So I'm continuing the theme from yesterday's video in relation to the military. This is a bit of an older story than that one, but it will sort of feed into it quite well with the recruitment issues. So let's crack on. Fury over damp and mouldy homes for Britain's armed forces veterans and military families are being failed as complaints about unsuitable living conditions surge by 40% in a year. And then it says, are you affected by those? Are you one of those affected? Get in touch. Now, as I said yesterday, the military is having serious recruiting issues. They're down over 3,000 troops net when you include those who have left and those who have successfully applied and got in. It's about a 16.9%, if I remember off the top of my head, difference. Now, this was something that I mentioned yesterday, was the conditions that people are living in, and I did speak about a bit more in that video. But people, this isn't a new issue to anybody who may not fully who either may be a bit younger or maybe say from, I don't know, USA or Canada or something. Mouldy barracks and substandard living conditions are nothing new in the British military, especially the army. Although I do believe that foreign armies seem to have a similar issue as well, and it does seem to be a recurring theme among military staff that they do get sort of defecated on by politicians. And the thing is young prospective recruits will be seeing stories like this, and they'll be hearing veterans like myself speak about this sort of stuff, and they're going to think, especially now with what these young people are like now, these internet-minded young people, they have got very high standards and very high opinions of themselves. And I'm not making that as a sort of comment on it either way. I think that's just from my own observations. I think that's just generally true. Obviously, there's exceptions, but I do think it is helpful to speak in generalisations sometimes. And young people are just going to see this and think, nah, it's all right, mate. Not for me. I'd rather stay at my mum and dad's, because that is a big thing now as well. You know, people aren't even moving out anymore. You know, it's a totally different world to when I was growing up in the 90s and early 2000s. Military families are being failed by ministers as complaints about damp and mouldy homes have increased by 40% this year, with thousands left in unsuitable conditions this winter. Some 3,770 complaints have been made to Pinnacle, which runs the National Complaints Service. Well, this is another problem with the military as well. A lot of the military housing is actually owned now by contracting staff. Now, I don't know if they outright own the buildings or if they're just paid to manage them. I was never married when I was in the army, so I was never that aware or into it. I lived on camp myself in the block. But I do remember there being a lot of crazy things. And the thing I don't get, though, is I remember because you have to march in and out of your room when you get into a new barracks. And it's the same with the housing. You march into your property, they give you a walk around of the house, show you all the rooms, show you all the plug sockets, you know, everything works. You know, all the walls are painted white or whatever they are, ceilings are painted white, carpets clean, stain free. And you get marched out of your accommodation as well. So you have to hand it back over in suitable condition. If you don't, you get raked over the coals for it. And then fined as well. They'll charge you loads of money for the costs to sort it all out. So you'll get guys, when they're leaving, they'll get like a couple of crates of beer. They'll invite a load of singletons from the block in, like myself. Say, hey lads, we'll all get drunk. We'll have a laugh, but let's get the house fixed up before I go. And because they're your mate, you do it. You know, it's just everybody cracks on with it. It's like a community. You know, it's like, yeah, right, he's bought us a beer. And we get a bit of free beer. We have a laugh. Then we've got a night out afterwards, and he doesn't get charged through the nose for a little scuff mark on the wall, because they do. You know, and you know, like, because I was a mechanic, I'm quite handy with tools. So, you know, like any damages to like plugs or stuff, I'd change plug sockets for them and things. You know, anything, just things like that. You know, just doing the basic work from, you know, steaming the carpets and repainting everything, you know, touching everything up, you know, filling in the wood and colouring it in so you can't see it on the side of the kitchen. Sort of stuff. It's just good crack, innit? You know, that's just life. That's just part of being in the military. Anyway, but my point being now, though, is a lot of these, what used to be done by the military, where it'd be the quartermaster would be in charge of the housing for that camp. It's now all gone to civilian contractors, and I think we'll see the consequences of that, where they're cutting corners. So, but the point I was trying to make is I don't get how these properties can be so mouldy and so damp and disgusting when people are marching out and then marching back into them. I'm not saying it's not happening, by the way. I believe it is happening. Obviously, it clearly is, because the evidence is overwhelming when you see it. I just don't understand how it can be happening because of these processes of the properties getting handed over and stuff. Furious personnel and their loved ones have broken ranks to share pictures online of a shameful state of their homes, with veteran British Army General branding the UK's woeful military housing stock truly appalling and not fit for a dog. No, he's absolutely right. But unfortunately, because the military, once upon a time, the British military used to have what's called Crown immunity, which meant that you used to be able to. I'm not saying get away, but you could, if you got involved in crime in the street, say you got into a fight in the street on a night out, and you'd get nicked by the local plod, the RMPs would come and collect you. You won't get prosecuted in a civilian court, and the military would deal with it. So I'm not saying it was any better. I'm not saying it was any worse. It's just the army dealt with its own. But now the military are expected to do everything civilian-wise, follow all civilian rules, get judged in civilian courts if necessary. All this civilian stuff. You don't even have a TV license in the block on camp. Yet you get the worst of being in the military with things like where the army can cut corners on standards in the accommodation, whereas if you were an actual civilian, they couldn't do that. It'd be against the law. So now the army are just getting the worst of both sides, because at least when you were having to live in substandard accommodation, there was the benefit of, well, you know what, if we get a bit drunk tonight and we get into a bit of a fight, we'll just get a dressing down on Monday morning, you know. So it was a trade off in that regards, you know. And I'm not saying that's morally right, by the way. I'm not saying soldiers should go out fighting, but that's generally what young soldiers do. They go out and fight, because that's the sort of person who wants to be in the army. That's just the way it is. You know, I'm not making a moral judgment on that. That's young men in general, you know, for right or wrong, you know. And do you want a nation of men who don't want to fight? Because I don't think that's going to be a nation that's going to last very long if you've got men who don't want to fight. Again, I'm not making a moral judgment there on whether fighting is right or wrong, but I think men fighting or wanting to fight is a necessity for a nation to survive. But just 1,200. Oh, another thing with this as well about these complaints from families, before I carry on reading. A lot of these soldiers can be risking the promotion by complaining as well. So this is another problem that they have here. You can end up with a black mark next to your name. You know, so if you're looking at being a career soldier and you're wanting to do 22 years, and you're at your 5 year point, you've got your lance corporal and you're wanting to get your full corporal, and do you want to be rocking the boat and complaining and going to the newspapers? Because you might not get that corporal. You might be lucky if you retire as a sergeant by doing that, because your name will be mud after that, and it will be written down in your file, went to newspapers. And although you're legally allowed to do it, other senior soldiers will look at that and be like, he's not a team player. And promotion boards will look at that and be like, no, we're not going to have that man or that woman as a full corporal or as a sergeant. So there is a big risk with these people. So you usually find a lot of these complaints come from people who are generally they're either thinking about leaving anyway, you know, they're disgruntled anyway, or they've signed off, or they're in the process of signing off. So I imagine this problem is a lot worse than what we're hearing about, because the majority of the people they may not even be signing off yet. They might be they might be at the 5 year point. I was plucking out thin air, and they might be thinking, you know what, I want to do 12 years, half a career, and then I'll sign off. You know, because I could reasonably make sergeant by my 12 year point. And if they're at their 5 or their 6 year point, they're thinking, well, you know, I've still got like 6 years left. I don't want to be rocking the boat yet. I'm still chasing them promotions. You know, so again, you've got these, you know, you've got these people who aren't wanting to rock the boat because they want to get promoted. Right, so thousands of families were promised mitigation work to prepare for this winter will also not see their homes repaired, according to data seen by the Daily Mail. No, they won't, because it's private companies and private contractors involved. When I was on camp in Germany, we had fluorescent lights in our rooms, big fluorescent tubes. We were all trained mechanics on my floor. I'm not saying a mechanic is an electrician, but changing a light bulb is well within the capabilities of mechanics. We weren't allowed to touch them. In the block across from us, because we shared a camp with 2 other units, we had infantry on one side of us, and we had armoured engineers on the other. They had actual qualified electricians on their camp, and they weren't allowed to do any of the work. They had to bring in private contractors. And you're looking, at the time, I think it was something like 80, because we were in Germany, it was like €80 just for the call out, for them to turn up and look at the job. And then there's the money on top of that. So you'd be looking at, like, say, a further 70 or €80 to replace the bulb. And then there'll be the marked up price of the bulb going in as well. You know, so a big fluorescent tube, I don't know how much they cost, but let's say they're €5 for a tube. They mark it up ridiculously, like up to like 50% or 100% markup. Crazy. The same happens in the NHS, by the way, for those of you who don't know. Even with things like those hand, you know, like the hand squirted, the hand cream on the wall, the hand sanitizer. The NHS generally don't fill them. They have contractors come around and doing it. It's all contractors. A lot of your GPs as well, especially the newer ones that were built from Tony Blair onwards, and hospitals are what are called PFI, which is private investors. And a lot of those have paid for themselves about 8 times over now since Tony Blair got them commissioned and built. That's how much that the rent and the maintenance is from, rather than the government just building them themselves. It's all about looking good on paper for the next 14 cycle. And that's where, don't get me wrong, I don't think the Conservatives have done any good for the NHS either, but the problem with the NHS started with Blair, with those PFIs. He started the downhill trajectory, but he took it past an event horizon, so to speak, where I don't think it can be reversed. And I do think that with the NHS now is something like it's 20 or 25% of the entire national budget. It's insane. So it's not like it's been underfunded. The whole thing has just been so poorly managed. Like with the military. Labour's Shadow Armed Forces Minister, Luke Pollard, I've skipped a video. The money would fund damp and mould mitigation packages for around 4,000 families who currently have a damp and mould report raised, representing around 60% of all properties requiring such work. That's 4,000 that we know about, and unfortunately, anybody who's been in the military will know, there'll be a lot more than that, because people will be reporting it, but they won't be getting written down, because you'll have certain officers or non-commissioned officers who won't want to look like they're not doing the job, so they'll be brushing some of it under the carpet as well, and that does unfortunately happen. I'm not saying that's widespread in the military, but like any large organisation, you know, you're talking about 80 to 100,000 people in the army. There's going to be some people there, unfortunately, who are willing to do bad things for their own career. It's just unfortunately the way it is. Oh. Labour's Shadow Armed Forces Minister, Luke Pollard, said the Conservatives are failing our forces and their families daily in the dire state of service family accommodation. It is just disgusting, to be honest with you. Now ministers are admitted that the winter plan to help families through the coldest months won't even fully deliver until spring. It beggars belief. Yeah, the thing is, though, and I said this yesterday in my video, the government can find money to house people coming over the channel illegally. Oh, they found billions for that very, very quickly. Like that, you know, instantly on the spot. You know, the war going on in Ukraine, we got told there was no money for anything. Then the Ukraine kicked off. All of a sudden, the Tories, we found 80 billion or whatever it was to give to Ukraine. It's funny how they can do that, isn't it? We've got soldiers here living in substandard conditions, and their families. Oh, sorry. There's nothing we can really do for that. You're just going to have to find it within your own budget that already pre-exists. Sorry, pal. Nothing we can do for you there, mate. No, sorry. In my opinion, our ruling echelons hate the people of this country. I believe they have what's called oikophobia. And for those, it's a real word, by the way. For those of you who don't understand what that means, it's the fetishization of the foreign with the hatred of the familiar. That is the correct term for oikophobia. And it's generally used for people who more have a hatred like of their own homestead, so to speak. But it can be applied much wider, and it's what George Orwell commented on with the intelligentsia, who would balk at the idea of standing up for the national anthem, but would celebrate foreign partisans defending themselves against what they would perceive to be an oppressive force. And we see that a lot in this country, even today. Oikophobia, it's a very apt term, and I suggest people learn that and start using it and inform other people on it. A Labour government will ensure our service people have homes fit for heroes and legislate to establish an Armed Forces Commissioner to act as a strong, independent voice for personnel and families. I don't believe it. Labour, in my opinion, hate the British military, and they have too many interest groups in Labour who are opposed to the British military. I would say people from certain communities and represent certain communities who aren't Indigenous Britons. I'll just leave it at that. But unfortunately, and radical oikophobes as well, who I will say, people like Jeremy Corbyn, although he's not in the Labour Party anymore, but people like Jeremy Corbyn. A lot of those people in the Labour Party. Among the images shared online by families including one by a heavily pregnant woman whose roof was leaking and another by a mother who claimed her house had been plagued by mould for months. One person wrote on X, 6 months pregnant and with a 4-year-old, but still no priority to sort the mould out. 3 months after being done, it's back again and worse than ever. Yeah, but if she was called Fatima, Channel 4 would be doing a full half-an-hour documentary on her, wouldn't they? As we've seen recently, Channel 4 actually do with a woman called Fatima. This is the problem that we have is, again, we have the ruling elite in our country and those who are in control of media and the levers of power and influence in the larger, older institutions. They hate the indigenous population of this country, in my opinion, and they fetishise and fawn over people who come here as new. Because, and I've said this in one of my videos yesterday, I think some of it is to do with the amount of childlessness in it going on at the moment, especially with highly educated people. And I think it's a form of infantilising certain groups to act as surrogate children for them because they haven't met those needs themselves through their life. Both bathrooms now full of mould, despite having the extractor fans replaced and used daily. This is another thing as well, is I think, this just pops into my head, I think some of this is jealousy as well, because they look at a lot of people in highly educated positions. Where I live, we have a very large university here, so I've met plenty of people when I was growing up. And I was quite often sneered at for having not gone to university and navel gazing because I was joining the military, looking down on it. Oh, you're so thick, oh, you aren't. You're too stupid to. You're not smart enough to go to university, are you? And really, I've ended up better off than most of them. I haven't been saddled with all the debt that they've got. I own my own home because I made wise decisions. I did go on the railway for a number of years afterwards, working as a railway engineer, stroke train driver at the same time. It was a multi-role job. So I ended up in a very, very responsible position, having not once stepped in a university or even a college for that matter. A college, for those who don't know, in different countries here is because we leave school at 16, so college is sort of your intermediate education between 16 and 18 going to university, so it's preparing you for university. In a separate post, a third person's military home even appeared to have a tree branch growing through the crack in the wall, which they claim to have been a problem since September last year. Yeah, I can well believe it. I'm surprised they didn't just tell him to prune it himself, if I'm honest with you. While one soldier's wife had her unsafe living quarters should be condemned after leaking pipes led to mould infestation in her bedroom and kitchen. But it's black mould as well, so this is really, really bad for your respiratory system. It's toxic and poisonous. It can kill you if you're exposed to it for long enough. It can give you irreversible damage as well to your airways. I can't believe they expect people to live like this, she said, adding, honestly never ever felt so low, and I feel ashamed to post these photos that we're living in such a dump, but it's down to no fault of our own. Absolutely disgraceful. General Sir Richard Barron's, former head of Joint Forces Command, slammed the shameful state of the British military housing, which he claimed has been a systemic problem that plagued the Ministry of Defence for decades. Yeah, that's absolutely true. This has been like the national shame of military housing and the state we expect. There's the property that's got it looks like ivy, not a tree, but it's still not acceptable. It's just disgusting, absolutely disgusting. And again, when this happens to whether illegal immigrants or actual legal refugees or asylum seekers or anybody who turns up and gets put in housing, this is all news. BBC, ITV, Sky News, all of them. Floor to ceiling coverage. We get shamed and browbeaten and told how racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, blah blah blah. We all are. We all know the spiel by now. It's a mantra, isn't it? At the end of the day, that. But when it's happening to people who are actually working for this country and putting their life on the line for the country, we get one newspaper discussing this, the Daily Mail, and then those people who would be climbing over themselves to show how emotional and caring they are for foreigners. They'll call these people fascists for trying to say, well, look at what's happening to our soldiers. Oh, shut your fascist. In a furious broadside against Whitehall, the veteran officer told the Mail, "We have some truly atrocious accommodation that people would not put a dog in." It is shocking. Well, it's true. People love the dog, so why would they put the dog in accommodation like that? It's an abuse of goodwill if you expect people to live in accommodation that would fail every social housing test, and yet we want them to defend the country. It's not, yeah, absolutely. Private landlords would get absolutely raked for this. They would get absolutely raked for property like this. I've even seen it where they've gone around properties and there's been private landlord-owned housing where there's been mould all up the walls, black mould all over the windows, and they've done the landlord, but it's not actually the landlord's fault. It's because the people living there have got clothes hanging everywhere. They're not even putting them on a spin dry, because when you put it in your washing machine, you can put it on the fast spin for 10 minutes, roughly, and that squeezes loads of the water out because it spins the drum that quick. So they're not even doing that before hanging them out. They're just taking them straight out of the washing machine while they're dripping wet and hanging them up with the heating on, central heating on full blast, and then shutting all the windows. So they're getting condensation all over the walls through their own bad choices, and then the landlord's getting done for it for what they are doing, and then they're then having to get they're then having to go to court, and the court's having to order all these special inspectors going, which the landlord's having to pay for. It's costing them thousands and thousands of pounds to prove that it's not actually the landlord who's doing it, and it's these people doing it themselves. Now, I'm not saying that all cases are like that. Far from it. There are obviously bad landlords as well who are cutting corners and not properly ventilating the properties and stuff. But in cases like that, what I'm saying is that can just be cleaned off. That surface smoke and white. But what we're talking about here is where it's ingressed into the actual mortar on the walls and the plaster. And it's getting into the plastic and the sealant around the windows and into the, it's actually getting into the building itself. And that is serious trouble. You got leaky pipes, or the mold's building from those leaky pipes. Why would I live in a freezing, grotty, mold-infested building as younger if you could live in a nice, new, modern flat somewhere else? Yeah, that's what I was saying before. Defence Minister Mr. Cartledge said, works are being rolled out as fast as the supply chain is available. As a large number of sites across the UK, therefore, it is not possible to provide a detailed breakdown by month. However, the most severely affected homes are being tackled first, and over 1,200 have been completed today. We estimate that around 3,300 will be completed by March 31st, 24, with the remaining circa 700 being completed early next financial year. Ministers also revealed that 312 service family properties were sitting empty in 2023 due to damp and mould issues. 312 houses, that's crazy. Meaning they are unsuitable to be allocated. This story is just shocking. Absolutely shocking. I'm going to leave it there. There's a couple of paragraphs left at the end, but it's just sort of getting drawn out. Just talking. There's nothing important there, really. I'll put the link below for the article. Please read it yourself. Make your own mind up. I'll just summarise once again what I was saying at the beginning. It's no surprise that young people aren't wanting to sign up to the military. With all of these protests that are going on, we've got a sort of middle class who absolutely hate Britain. They think we're racist, think we're sexist, think we're homophobic. They think we're solely responsible for slavery in history. They don't care that we ended it. They think that... Sorry about that. I just had a phone call then from my mum. So anyway, back to the video. Yeah, as I was saying, we've got a sort of like middle class people who hate the country. They think we're responsible for all the wars. They've also, like I was saying before with the oikophobia, we're seeing the absolute massive mobs of people going out supporting Hamas and the Palestinian plight. But we didn't have the same thing when it was up to 1 million white working class Anglo-Saxon Christian girls being raped by predominantly Pakistani, Bangladeshi rape gangs. There was no outpouring from these people then. So it just shows the state of our society at the moment and what a precarious position we're actually in. And it doesn't bode well for the future. Because again, young people will be seeing all those people and thinking, why should I fight and risk my life for that bunch of ingrates who hate me and hate the country? And they see all these people coming over the boat on boats, throwing the passports away, laughing and joking, and then, as you'll see in some of my other videos, committing horrendous crimes when they've not even been processed for asylum or refugee status. They're still pending, and they're going out committing horrendous crimes. And again, young people will be seeing that and thinking, why should I fight for that? And then after they commit these, like that, I did one video yesterday, a man's just been sentenced for drug dealing and rape on a young girl. Um, he's from he's from Gambon or somewhere like that. But it's not the first time he's been sentenced for those two exact same crimes. He's not long been released. In 2000, I think it was 2008 or 2012, he got sentenced 10 years for drug dealing, Class A drugs and rape. And for those who don't know, Class A is the most serious, like heroin, cocaine, things like that. So he's then been released, prowled around again, got engaged in the exact same crime of drug dealing, and then raped a 17-year-old girl. Straight, this is what young people are seeing, and they're thinking, why should I fight for this country? Why should I die for this country? And I'm getting to the point where I think, are they wrong to think that? But then I suppose the government will man the military any way they can, and if people from Britain don't fill those spots, they will just open it up to people from places like Africa. They'll just offer jobs to absolute foreigners, and then we'll end up with a mercenary army. And I don't know if that would be a good outcome, to be honest with you. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. If you've found this video interesting or informative or anything like that, please like, subscribe, and give us a comment below. I do like to message people back as well if you do comment. Also, can you visit the website? I'll put the link below for this article. They have advertisers on their page. I'm not sponsored in any way, shape or form. I don't receive any money for it. It just, obviously, I think it's just good courtesy and good form just to send a bit of internet traffic their way, as it helps them with their revenues. Anyway, thanks for now. Take care. Goodbye.